Assalamu alaikum, Brother Safi Kaskas.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother
Welcome,
Muqtedar.
welcome to the next edition of Khanversations. This is the third one in the series on the Quran. I'm also very grateful to the Islamic Community Center of Lancaster, which is also co-hosting this series. So I'm delighted for their support. Today we are going to talk about a fascinating translation of the Quran. It is by Brother Safi Kaskas and his colleague David Hungerford. This is the book that I'm talking about, the Quran with references to the Bible. So it is a contemporary understanding, a contemporary translation of the Quran. Brother Safi Kaskas first published a translation of the Quran, and then he referenced to the Bible. So there are 3,000 footnotes or 3,000 references to the Bible. While he does talk about it as if it's a translation of the Quran, I realize that it's a contemporary translation of the Quran with the Bible as a commentary of the Quran. So the footnotes that are there, the 3,000 footnotes, are in essentially trying to explain Quran with reference to the Bible. So you could argue that this is tafsir bil Injil wa Torah. So this is like a tafsir of the Quran coming from the Bibles. So his colleague is now late, may God bless his soul. Dr. David Hungerford was a believing and practicing Christian. Brother Safi Kaskas, alhamdulillah, is a believing and practicing Muslim. He is originally from Lebanon, a naturalized American citizen who has made his fortune as a management consultant in the Middle East, especially in Saudi Arabia. And he was motivated to provide this contemporary understanding of the Quran because he was horrified, like many of us, with what happened on September 11, and he wanted people to understand that this was not his religion, this was not Islam, this is not what his holy book, the Quran, taught. But besides the political implications of responding to such an event, and also his desire to reach out to people of the book and explain to them what the Quran truly is, there are many methodological assumptions, digressions, and complexities that Brother Safi Kaskas brings to his commentary and his translation. And those are the things that I'm interested in. My last conversation was with Professor Joseph Lombard, talking about the study of Quran, which excluded modern and contemporary commentaries and translations and focused only on the classical, with an partly stated and partly unstated, shall we say, fatwa or conclusion that the true meaning of the Quran can only be understood from the past understandings. However, Brother Safi Kaskas is trying to make the argument that the Quran needs a fresh look, a modern look. And it is that aspect of it that I would like to talk about. When you say a contemporary look, what do you mean, Brother Safi?
Well, looks don't interest me. I want contents. The contents of the translation need to be contemporary. When I look at Ibn Kathir commentary on the Quran, I see a fantastic work that probably benefited Muslims tremendously during his time and probably still benefit them until today, because I depended on it to basically understand a lot of things that are already in my translation. But Ibn Kathir died close to 1,000 years ago, 900 something years. The word didn't stop during these 900 something years. The word kept moving forward. And the amount of knowledge we have today in the last 50 years probably doubled from all previous centuries before that. And now knowledge is doubling every couple of months. Some people say every 24 hours, I don't know. But things are moving forward. Unless we are committed to continuously try to understand a contemporary meaning of the Quran, we will not be doing Quran a justice. If we are really to love the book, to respect it, if we really think it's the word of Allah We need to continuously look at it and try to interpret it, try to understand it, try to express our understanding in a contemporary way. This is the short answer.
See, so for example, without sounding frivolous, let me give you an example. So for example, the word gay in English, if you had read a sentence saying so-and-so is gay 300 years ago, you would reach a very different meaning, but the word has now gathered a different meaning. So today, if I say so-and-so is gay, you will reach a different meaning, right?
Yes.
And wouldn't that also happen to your understanding and translation of the Quran when you look at the Quran from only contemporary eyes and contemporary understandings? And so the person 300 years ago who was gay was just happy, but you might misunderstand it today.
Yes. The key word that you use that I want to eliminate is only. There is no such thing with me as only. I look at the past, at the present, but my eyes are fixed on the future of my grandchildren, your grandchildren. They deserve from us to give them the kind of Quran that will be corresponding to the life they're living, that will answer problems that they are going through today. I mean, the way our ancestors understood the Quran is great. It suits probably their purposes to the most. At that time, the whole ummah was motivated to go and explore new sciences in every field. But today, the ummah is at the bottom of the barrel. The ummah is not as motivated. The best among us are just striving to make a living. So this project has nothing to do with that. I already spent on this project over $500,000 out of pocket. I have no sponsor except the money that I made, Allah gave me through my years of work. And this project is not ending with the 2 books that I did on the Quran. Now the 3rd book is going to be a thematic Quran, because in my opinion, the best way to understand the Quran is through themes and subjects. You can't understand it one ayah at a time. You have to go and find the subject you're looking at and compare verses. So anyway, what I'm trying to tell you is, while we are understanding the Quran in a contemporary way, we are also making the new language that will communicate the meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant for us to understand. Yes, we are. Language matters. Language is the only way we can express our thoughts, and we are creating with the contemporary understanding a new Quranic language to communicate to our children and to their friends what the Quran is saying.
You know, philosophically and politically, I am completely sympathetic to your position. And I also feel that 2 things. It's not just that the Quran is actually addressed to me as a believer.
Yes.
I think this is the original spam. God sent the Quran to everybody.
Yes.
In all times. Like he said,
yes.
He said, send to everyone.
Yes.
So it has come to me directly through Prophet Muhammad and Jibril, but it speaks to me. And
yes.
so while I might take into advisement the opinions and of other commentators and translators, ultimately I feel that I'm only responsible for what I understand and I relate to what
yes.
But from a little bit of, as a scholar, as an academic, to me, a couple of your methodological assumptions were a little curious. So, for example, you assert in your introduction and also with me during the preparation for this interview that you do not subscribe to the idea of abrogation in the Quran.
Yes.
What do you mean?
I totally reject the idea of abrogation. You know, when Brother Muqtedar, I moved into this project in stages. I was naive when I started. Then after years of working, I worked on this translation 6 years full time, from Fajr to 10:30, 11 o'clock at night every day. I had to forsake the consultancy business I have. In my head, a voice told me, you either work for me full time or you don't work. So I sent my wife to the company and we closed it down. I found jobs for the people that were working for me, the consultants, but I gave it full-time focus. Let me tell you how I started and then how I graduated in my understanding. When I finished working on the translation, I asked myself a question: what is Allah trying to tell me through this book? What's the essence of this book? You and I shared what I think is the essence. It's freedom. But leave that alone for a minute, and let's go back to your question, because the two are interrelated, but I want to go to your question. I found that the Quran itself is telling me that it cannot be abrogated. But this is like using the Quran to prove the Quran. Before we do this, I noticed that we really have two books that Allah gave us. Yes. That are His words, the Quran and the universe. Yeah. If we understand, the more we understand one, the more we understand the other. Now, if we look at the universe, we notice that Allah is created laws for this universe, and they're very precise. Now, the same author gave us the Quran. How can he be very precise in one place and not precise at all in the other? Abrogation, in my mind, is an insult to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I refuse it. Every word I consider in this book to be in the right place at the right time. Therefore, I reject synonyms in the Quranic Arabics. I think Allah is the best of authors, the best person that can speak that language. He doesn't need to use synonyms like Arab used to in the 7th century. He says every word exactly where it's supposed to be. So everything in that book is perfect as far as I'm concerned.
You know, you made an interesting statement about the two books that God has essentially. The creation is also His ayahs, His signs, and the book is also a compilation of His ayats, so they are His signs. And in the Quran, you know, there are direct references to both. Look at for His signs on the horizon and look at His signs in the book. So in that sense, it is a very Quranic position. And Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, an Indian modernist, once said something very interesting. He said, the creation is the work of Allah and the Quran is the word of Allah, and the two cannot contradict each other.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, it was a beautiful statement, and I actually believe so. But on this subject, let me, if you, with your permission, I want to pull this thing up, if you don't mind, the ayah that I have in mind. So if you look at, are you able to see this? This is the...
Yes, I see it.
Yeah,
I know the ayah very well.
Yeah, so the ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, which implies abrogation, at least uses the word. Now, I think that some scholars in the past have abused this. They have used abrogation to mean nullify. So God nullifies a previous command. So some have used this to argue that God has nullified all the shariahs that came prior to the Quran. Therefore, Christianity, Judaism, all others are nullified. And then they also try to nullify. In fact, they try to nullify all instances of pluralism, tolerance, and acceptance of the other in the Quran. If you actually go and see what verses they are targeting, it's as if some of them are classical scholars, did not like the fact that God was being tolerant to, especially people of the book, and so they targeted. However, this is your translation in the bottom, and this is what worries me. You are trying to obviously explain why you reject abrogation, and yet there is a verse in the Quran which says God does abrogate, and so you insert this in the brackets from the previous book. See, to me, that is troubling because that doesn't come from the text. So where is this coming from? From the previous book. The idea that you're saying God doesn't abrogate anything in the Quran, and I think so too. God only provides something that is the same or better, which means He has not reduced anything, same or better. But this idea that it's abrogating from other previous books, that cannot be driven.
Can I give you an example?
You can give me an example, but I don't know how you conclude that it is from the previous books.
The example will tell you.
Okay.
For instance, the Jewish Sharia has 14 crimes punishable by death. One of them is not to be kind to your parents, punishable by death, stoning actually. The 14s were reduced in the Quran to one. That one is to kill an innocent person.
Yeah.
So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to abrogate, he's abrogating from previous books, from previous Sharia. It's not within the same book. See, as we move forward, as he's taking us forward, he is trying to tell us that I'm more lenient with you. I'm responding to your social needs today, and the rest is going to be up to you later. In other words, all tashri'ah, in my mind, ended with the Quran, and now it's time to start tashri'ah through parliaments, through Congress, through other things, in a way that doesn't contradict with the Quran.
But if you look at these two verses, 65th and 66th from Surah 8,
yes,
this, God first said that for those of you who are believers, you should be able to fight odds of 1:10, really. If you are 20, you should stand up to 200, and if you are 100, you should be able to stand up to 1,000.
yes, yes.
And if you were following the historical method, if you looked at the Asbab al-Nuzul of
Yes.
the Ayah and the story that the Sahaba
Yes.
came to Prophet Muhammad,
Yes.
like saying, how can we do this? And so
Yes.
God then changes it to 2. The odds are
Yes.
now 1:2.
Yes.
So some of the classical scholars give this as an instance of abrogation within the
Yes, they certainly do. Very familiar with this example. But in fact, none of that, neither the first nor the second abrogate any of it. It's an added meaning. It's an expanded meaning. But I see, look, you're showing me verses from the Quran. Let me state some verses from the Quran.
Okay.
We go to Surah Hud, verse 1. It says, ألف لام را كتاب أحكمت آياته ثم فصلت. Kitab, the whole book has أحكمت آياته, it's all perfected. ثم فصلت, then it made the detailed. So how can a book that is complete, that it's all muhkam as a book, as a whole book, how can we even think that Allah is changing? This is not changing. That example you gave me has no abrogation at all. It's those classical scholars who saw it this way based on their understanding, based on their time, based on the need of the time, based on their knowledge. I don't know, but I don't see abrogation here at all.
Okay.
There are several ayahs that I have with me that I prepared the same way you prepared that will show abrogation is impossible within the same book. And let me give you some credit for, see, look, I hate when people put brackets. I hate it. Yeah. Then I found, you just pointed to me, yesterday you pointed something to me that I need to correct. And you were correct about it. Thank you. And today you just pointed something else that I think you're absolutely right. This should not go within the verse. It should go below. It should go as a
footnote.
Footnote. Yeah. I mean, I hate what the Noble Quran did, Hilali and Khan.
Yeah.
And I'm making now the same mistake. Thank you again for pointing this to me. But seriously, I don't see abrogation in the two examples that you gave me here.
Actually, one of the conclusions of this short conversation is that you need to do a commentary. so that way.
I'm doing that right now, brother.
Inshallah.
See, this time that we are all stuck at home, I'm using it.
Yes.
Working on simple, because I don't want to go into and involve. I'm not going to do another study Quran. It's just explanation of assumptions that I believe. You see, every translation is the author's understanding.
It is an interpretation.
Translator understanding.
Yeah.
My translation or any other translation of the Quran has no holiness at all. It's just the translator's understanding. So I want my understanding to be clear, mostly to my grandchildren and maybe to everybody around. Even the purpose that we did this translation for with time changed. Is no longer for Americans in general, but we can talk about that.
Thomas Jefferson made an interesting argument that every generation must have its own social contract and its own constitution.
Yes.
And Well, I think that every generation of Muslims ought to live by their own contemporary understanding of the Quran and not by, I mean, we can take their opinions and the scholarship and some of the,
Yes,
yes,
yes, yes.
like,
I
we
mean
live
to
by
that.
it. Yeah. And
Wonderful.
yeah, and you know, I mean, Tabari and Ibn Kasir are fabulous scholars. So is Fakhruddin al-Razi. Yes, we will benefit from their scholarship,
Yes.
which I think is guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be able to produce something like that. I also want to touch upon this thing that this point that you make, that people who have better tools of understanding,
Knowledge.
better
Yes.
better tools of knowledge, have
Yes.
better understanding of the
Yes.
Quran. And it was very clear that you were alluding to scientific progress, scientific knowledge, scientific tools of understanding. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes. Let me give you a case in point. And,
Yeah.
you know, if we take Surah Al-Tariq,
Yes.
in Ibn Kathir, if you look at the meaning of Al-Tariq, it's the late night comer. Then it has a Najm al-Thaqib. That means Allah is talking about something in the heavens. So they all went outside and looked and saw that Al-Mushtari, Jupiter, comes out late at night. So they say God must be talking about Jupiter. Well, today, with today's knowledge, we know we're talking about a pulsing star, a pulsar. And in my book, in my translation, I have a link to NASA. And I also, if you go to the link, you can hear. This is At-Tariq.
Yeah.
So, you know, I cannot stop what man's look. The people are exploring the universe. This we started. It was supposed to be our job, and we gave the seeds to the rest of the world, and then we went to sleep. Brother, let me tell you something. My main purpose is not to translate the Quran. My main purpose is to wake up this ummah and try to tell them, look, use your brains, use your intellect that God gave you. That's all. My translation might be the worst translation in the world. But if I can raise question, and if I can get people to be interested in looking at the question and try to have a better answer for them, I would have done what I'm supposed to do.
I mean, you have done something absolutely fantastic.
Thank
So
you.
let me raise you this interesting question about the scientific tools. This is one of some of the most favorite ayats from the Quran that I really am floored by them.
Yes.
So this ayah are from Surah Al-Imran.
Yes.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna fi khalqis samawati wal ard wal ikhtilafil layli wan nahari la ayatil li ulil albab. So I want to talk a little bit about ulil albab, and I think the next ayah, 191, actually describes who ulul albab are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alladhina yaskuruna allaha qiyaman wa qu'udan wa ala junubihim وَيَتَفَكَّرُونَ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the people of understanding are those who remember Allah while standing, while sitting, while lying down on the side. But they are also those who reflect upon His creation, who are basically doing zikr of both His books.
Yes.
Who are doing fikr and zikr.
Yes.
So to me, this says that the people of understanding are some of my audience might not like it, but they seem to be like Sufi scientists, or scientists or Sufis or philosophical mystics. So people who are doing from tasawwuf, but also who are scientific. So somebody like Ibn Sina comes to my mind
Yes.
as someone who would do both zikr, but would also do scientific research. So if this is there, then the modern world may have one aspect of it: advanced scientific knowledge, advanced social science, hermeneutic methods, but without the other aspect of being those who also do zikr and who also reflect on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't think they will be able to even understand the Quran. So for example, even in this ayah of Mutashabihat also talks about them as ulul albab.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Oh, yes. Actually, brother, I agree with you completely. I mean, there is no discussion there. There's no argument. First of all, when Einstein was asked about God, I think his answer was also a Sufi answer. Sometime when you're so immersed in science, especially the science of the universe, your mind is blown by what you see, by God creation. You might not verbalize it and say, Subhanallah, like we do, but your body movement, certain words you say will tell me that you were touched. And when that answer that Einstein was given at that time, pointing to his formula and saying, I see God there. This is, to me, is a beautiful Sufi answer. What we are lacking here is Muslims that are budgeting for research and development. Muslims that see Islam through a very narrow way, like in a tunnel vision. For the last 50 years, my life was wasted with the narrow ideas spread by Wahhabism. It's just mind-boggling that the budgets, the money we had, we did not invest for our youth to go and start labs, start doing research, lead the world again in scientific progress. We had that opportunity. We're going to be asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about it. I mean, I'm using my money to do books on the Quran. I have 3 more books coming soon, inshallah. Maybe one day we'll talk about them. One of them is the thematic Quran. But we see, this is one side. The other side, the practical side, is to put our money where our mouth is. Do we want to continue to be consumers of everything, including ideas? And isn't it time for us to start looking at the strong foundation that Allah gave us and start being innovative in thinking? This tunnel vision is not taking us anywhere. It's pulling us back more and more. It's not going to work. You know?
No, I want to go back. I mean, I appreciate this desire for intellectual reawakening. This has been a problem, and Muslims have been talking and writing about it for about 100 years. But this idea that understanding is not just a product of, at least the Quranic understanding, the spiritual and religious understanding, is not just a product of knowledge, but it's also a product of piety, personal piety. So for example, even the first ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It is a guidance to those understanding. And it is very clear in many parts of the Quran that the purer your heart becomes, the better your understanding will become. But there is a limitation to that. And so the contemporary argument is that past understandings may have been influenced by past political, social, cultural context, and therefore we need to rescue the meanings of the Quran from the past social, cultural context and bring it into ours. So in that context, I want to touch upon the other important aspect of your book, which is that it is an instrument for outreach, especially to the people of the book, right? The whole idea of saying that, look, there is so much in common between the Quran. There are 6,300 verses in the Quran and 3,000 biblical verses you reference. So nearly 50%. Yeah, you're saying that 50% of the Quran is found in the Bible. So how was the response from Christians with whom you engaged? And does it eliminate? Well, go ahead and tell me what was the
Let me tell you. I'll give you some examples.
Sure.
The first order I got for the book, the second day it was published. I was at the National Prayer Breakfast, and I was called by 2 brothers, one Muslim, and he had with him one evangelical friend of his that worked in a foundation that owns schools. We went down the Hilton Hotel, we sat down in a corner, and he ordered 1,000 copies of the books to go to that foundation to distribute to their schools. See, they thought the work is that important See, look, some Christian Americans, some evangelical Americans are very, very good people, tremendously good people. And they're curious naturally, and they have open mind, and they want to understand. They want to build bridges. They're bridge builders. Like my co-author, God bless his soul, Dr. David Hungerford. He read the translation of the Quran over 30 times. I haven't read it 30 times. I don't have the patience to read it 30 times. He read it 30 times. And every time he came, he corrected commas here, this there, and that there. And he asked me questions, you know. This is, it touches my heart, the devotion he had for this project. So, but other American evangelicals hate the guts of Muslims. They don't want to see us around here. They hate the fact that every year we have over 3,000 converts to Islam. And they can't stop us. They've been trying to stop us for over a decade now, 15 years maybe. But they're not able to do it. We have more and more people accepting Islam. Okay, now that will give me personally a responsibility. I don't know about you or anybody else, but if I want any change, it has to start with me. This project for me was not a translation project. I'm a strategist, so it was a strategy project. I had a vision and a mission and a target audience and goals, and I'm working with that. The vision is to always have a contemporary translation of the Quran. So this is only the first attempt. We're working now on the second attempt, and later, as long as I'm alive, I'll work on the third attempt, or I will have people on the team that will continue the work. So we will always have a contemporary understanding. I cannot, if I had resources, I will invest these resources in two ways: in better understanding of the Quran and better research and development.
You know, I mean, I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the time and energy to continue with this project. But I wanted to also touch upon this issue that Muslims put in a lot of effort to get others to understand their faith, appreciate their faith, respect it, acknowledge it. We are always constantly working towards acceptance of Islam and so on and so forth. But we don't put in the same kind of effort at acknowledging others and providing the same degree of acceptance and recognition to other faiths. I mean, in traditional Muslim countries, people of the book enjoy tremendous legal and other status culturally also. However, here I notice that there is always this underlying assumption that our faith and our faith alone is true, and and everybody else's faith is, you know, we are good people, so we tolerate and accept you, but really, but in reality, you know, we are on the straight path, none of you are. So in that context, you know, you're familiar with this whole controversy over Ayah 262 in Surah Al-Baqarah and 569 in Maida, and that's why this idea of abrogation has become so contentious in our time, that those who have a very narrow understanding of of who a Muslim and believer is, use abrogation to eliminate the pluralism in the Quran. Whereas those who are challenging the idea of abrogation are also in a way advancing and freeing all the verses in the Quran that advocate pluralism and tolerance, like La Ikraha fi Din, and the verse about Nasara, the Hadu and Sabain, etc. So where do you stand on this? I mean, this is the other way.
It's a tragic situation. You're describing something that's already there. I cannot deny it. We have, I don't know how many millions of Muslims are in the United States, but we have the good, the bad, and the ugly among us. We're not all college professors. We're not all strategists. We have people that do manual work that came to the United States for economic reasons. See, in 1973, I started the first Islamic center in the city of New Orleans. And I lived daily with the problems of the Muslims. Every day. Today, in 2020, I still see in new mosques that I visit the same problems repeated. The
Yeah.
same exact we did not free ourselves. We did not move forward. You know, our culture keep producing itself. The same culture. We came. I dare to say, I learned from the American way of life. I learned a lot. I mean, uh, I consider myself Americanized right now. I'm an American Muslim. I say it everywhere. I say it in my speeches. I say it in my writing. I'm an American Muslim. There are some people that left Egypt, for instance, that are still Egyptian deep down in their home. They're Egyptian. They did not assimilate. You know, those people, when I go to speak at the mosque, immediately they stand up and say, they call me kafir because I am cutting slag for Ahlul Kitab. To me, the verse in the Quran that would really summarize where I stand is 548.
Yes.
548 says you have to race toward competing and doing good.
Yeah. If I wanted,
And
I would have created everyone
oh,
equally.
if everyone, and Allah is telling us there that, look, you're already gonna return to me. I'll tell you about your differences. But in the meantime, while you are here on planet Earth, try to serve each other, compete in serving, compete in setting the example. I mean, to me, what Jesus teaches is 100% Islamic. I adopt it all the time. I never mention anything from the Quran without mentioning something that Jesus said in one of the four Gospels. To me, he's the ultimate Muslim, you know, and the ultimate Sufi, by the way.
That's
Oh,
true.
I'm not a Sufi, but, you know, my grandfather was, and I don't mind telling you, I went to the same zikr 17 years after his death, and they found that they're still holding the same seat he used to occupy for me. This to me speaks volumes of those people. So Islam is diversified. We have a pluralism within Islam.
Yeah.
And there's some Muslims that want to eliminate all this. They want us only to adopt their tunnel vision. The Quran is not that. I'm not here to please anybody. I'm here to please an audience of one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah told me to love everybody. Allah told me he honored the children of Adam. Honoring them at least require that I respect them. I respect my Christian and Jewish neighbors. I will sit with them as equal and listen to them and set an example for them. If they want to be guided, Allah committed on himself to guide them.
You know, I cannot move forward without actually appreciating the enormous pluralism that is contained in 548. It essentially says that we have given a different Sharia.
Yes.
And a different method.
Yes.
Shara'an wa minhajan. For every one of you.
Yes.
Only so that you may compete in doing good.
Yes.
There is no other religious text that I have seen. Yes, philosophically today we have.
Quran is the only one that has
that pluralistic message. It is such a sad thing that Muslims tend to try to abrogate that or ignore it or not teach it frequently. My next question to you is a little bit more like, for example, I want to share with you as to how I approach the Quran.
Yes.
So about 20 years ago, I discovered an ayah. And to me, that was the way to understand and explain the Quran. And I've stuck with it. And in my book, I'm not trying to plug in, but this book that I wrote on Ihsan, took me 7 years to write.
Yes,
so in this book, I talk about Ihsan as an epistemology, as the way of looking at things, and especially at looking at the Quran. So I want to pull this ayah, and then I want to see what you have to say about it. So to me, this ayah is like a guiding principle. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allazina yastami'un qawl fayattabi'una ahsanahu. Who listen to the speech of this is obviously referring to the Quran. Those who listen to the Quran and follow the best. Yes, best meaning of it, you know. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, even from my book, when you read it and listen to it, extract the best meaning from it. And he didn't use any other synonym of best. He used ahsan in it. So to
Yes.
me, this is a command to interpret and look at the Quran also to the eyes of ahsan, from the best.
Yes.
And so in order to be able to see beauty, you have to be beautiful. So you have to first elevate yourself, become part of the ulul albab, and then
Yes.
try to interpret. So I have been trying to do this, and I was wondering if how you would react to this ayah.
I love it. But brother, you and I are from the same generation. Our generation is a wounded generation. We lived our childhood suffering from the either colonialism or the effects of colonialism on the Muslim world. We unfortunately, after a lifetime, I'm in my 70s now, you're much younger than I am, but we're not moving forward. I'm not able to shake, for instance, the results of the 1967 war in the Middle East. To me, that war broke my back, and my back is still broken. I went through some analysis, my wife and I, with a group of people, and the analyst told us that we all have one thing in common: the result of the tragedy of 1967 war. I mean, all Arabs have a fantastic tragedy in their life. Whatever I'm doing is a reaction to that tragedy. And my heart is bleeding because of that. So I'm not a very healthy person. Arabs are not very healthy people at this time. And the people that defeated them in 1967 are even inflicting more defeats on them every day. And you think this will, the basic reaction will be to stand up, feel tall, get the resources together, and try to correct the situation. They're not doing that. You know, they're not doing this. I met here in Washington, D.C. in a restaurant with an Israeli guy, a writer, a thinker. He told me about the results of the 1967 war in Israel. So now I know both sides of the coin. Most of the Israelis at that time were atheists, secular people. After 67, the majority became religious, not Orthodox, religious. They started believing in God again. So the event that broke my back and the back of my generation was an event that gave hope to the other. So what we're doing today is doing something impossible against an impossible situation. I think I was able to cure my wounds as much as possible. My translation of the Quran is rebelling against the current situation I live. I'm trying to say, I'm here. I want to be counted. My presence in the United States is that also. So when we take the Quran, we take an ayah like this, and that addresses ihsan in such a beautiful way. Most Muslims don't even understand what ihsan is. The best among us will recite a hadith about ihsan, one hadith they learn, to worship God as if you see him, and if you don't see him, you should know that he sees you. And they stop right there. But how would you interact with the meaning of ihsan, the state of ihsan, al-hal, al-hal? This is what matters. This is what will change your heart. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. Allah will not change our state unless we change what's inside us. Ihsan is what needs to be changed. This is what should replace defeats. This is what should replace egotism. That's what should selfism. Oh, ihsan is the cure for our future problems if we make it our nature, our second nature, if we start behaving with ihsan. This is how I feel. You just touch a very raw nerve in me, you know.
Yeah, but you're also demonstrating that as to how all understandings, I think, of religious texts are a function of the context in which they live. So, for example, I, whenever I read Ibn Taymiyyah, I profoundly disagree with a lot of his analysis, but he was living at the time of the Crusades and of the Mongols in
Maghul,
India.
yes,
So
yes,
he so some of his reactions were to the political context of his time, and I
indeed,
realized that none of us is able to extricate themselves from their political, social circumstances or their material conditions, and to be able to, because when I saw this, to me this ayah simply blew it, and I said, I mean, there are philosophically a lot of assertion that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is saying that there are less than beautiful ways of also interpreting my sources. And it is only those of understanding, those who do dhikr while standing and sitting and while lying down on their side, they and those who do fikr are the ones who are ulul albab, and they are the ones who can see the more beautiful meanings of the same text. And
yes,
so I think that American Muslims, compared to at least other communities in the world, live in a much more freer circumstances.
yes,
We live in political, religious, and cultural freedom to some extent. There is a Islamophobia, but yet uh, the Islamophobia doesn't impinge on our capacity to understand our sources. No one is killing us for the books we are writing here. So, so to me, I think this is like a further kifaya for American Muslims to revisit Islamic sources, particularly the Quran, and try to definitely extract contemporary understanding. And so one of the focuses of this conversations on the Quran is I'm trying to talk to as many contemporary scholars and who have spent time with the Quran and are trying to understand it in our times. And so let me congratulate you on your fantastic effort. It is very clearly that probably the last 10 years of your life you have devoted in the service of the Quran, and I really applaud you. I'm jealous of the fact that you're able to do that. I pray that Allah gives me enough years after my retirement that I can just devote it to the
inshallah.
Quran. Yeah, especially after I have taken care of the financial needs of my family. So to me, this is absolutely fantastic that it is not just an exercise in theology for the sake of theology,
No,
but it is an exercise in civilizational reawakening. And
yes,
so to me, that is the best part. And it is also an awakening which is not hostile towards others, but an
no,
actually something that is trying to reach out to others. So with that message, I want to thank you, and
thank
I
you.
would recommend lots of Muslim scholars and students and to read the book, take a look at it, also share it with your uh, friends who are Christians and Jews and people of other faith. So thank you very much, Brother Safi, for taking your time out and talking to me so candidly, so frankly, so
Thank
honestly.
you.
I really appreciate it.
God bless. Thank you.
Islam.